For 4 days, the man who controls the most dangerous government in the Middle East said absolutely nothing. No video, no speech, no press conference. Not a single word. Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, had been appointed on March 8th. His own succession rally happened in Tehran, and he was not there. Supporters stood in a crowd holding up a photograph of him because there was nothing else to hold. Then, today, Thursday, March 12th, he finally broke his silence. And what he said did not bring this war closer to ending. It made it impossible, in a written statement read aloud by a state TV anchor, because the man himself still has not appeared on camera. Mojtaba Khamenei delivered 4 declarations that every government on earth is now processing with alarm. Number 1, the Strait of Hormuz must remain closed. He called it, and I am quoting directly here, a tool to pressure the enemy. Number 2, all U.S. military bases in the Middle East must shut down immediately. And if they do not, quote, those bases will be attacked. Number 3, Iran has studied the opening of brand new war fronts, ones where, in his words, the enemy has little experience and is highly vulnerable. And number 4, the 3 conditions Iran demands before this war ends. Those 3 conditions are the reason I made this video today. Because when you read them carefully, when you understand what Iran is actually asking for and what Washington can never agree to, you realize this is not a war moving toward a negotiated end. This is a war being locked into a longer, more dangerous phase. Before I break down exactly what those 3 demands are, why each one is a red line for the United States, and what happens to oil prices, your groceries, and the global economy if this war has no visible exit, hit the subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. This story is moving faster than almost anything I have covered. And what happens in the next 72 hours will determine whether diplomatic back channels can pull this back from the edge. You need to be here when the next development breaks. Let me show you exactly what is in that statement. And more importantly, let me show you what the headlines are not telling you, what Mojtaba Khamenei actually said, word by word. Quick context first. Mojtaba Khamenei, 56 years old, was selected as Iran's 3rd supreme leader on March 8th, 10 days after his father, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was killed in U.S.-Israeli airstrikes on February 28th. The same strike that killed his father also killed his mother, his wife, and his son. He himself sustained leg injuries, including a fractured foot, in that same attack. He has not appeared publicly since. Now, when a head of state communicates only through a written statement read by a TV anchor after 4 days of total silence, every word in that statement carries enormous weight. Intelligence agencies around the world do not just read what was said. They analyze what was included, what was left out, the order in which points were made, and the specific language chosen. So let me walk through this statement the way analysts are walking through it right now. Point 1. He opened with a vow of revenge. Iran will not refrain from avenging the blood of its martyrs. He specifically mentioned a strike on a girls' school in Maddow in southern Iran that occurred on March 1st. According to Iranian state media and confirmed by UN investigators, between 165 and 180 people were killed in that strike, most of them school children. The UN condemned it as one of the deadliest single strikes of the war. CNN's analysis suggested U.S. responsibility. Both the U.S. and Israel denied involvement. Mojtaba Khamenei said, every person killed in this war is, and I am quoting, an independent case for revenge. Think about what that language means strategically. He is not saying Iran will seek one act of revenge and then consider the account settled. He is saying every single casualty And the UN Refugee Agency reported today that 3.2 million people have been displaced inside Iran alone. Every single casualty is its own open account, its own individual obligation for retaliation. That is not the language of a government preparing for a negotiated ceasefire. Point two, he addressed the Strait of Hormuz directly. Certainly the lever of blocking the Strait of Hormuz must continue to be used. And then he went further. He said the strait's closure should be used as, his words, a tool to pressure the enemy, not as a one-time military tactic, not as a temporary measure, a tool, something you pick up, apply pressure with, and put down only when you get what you want. Oil markets reacted within minutes of the statement being read. Brent crude, which had briefly pulled back toward $90 a barrel following the IEA's historic reserve release of 400 million barrels, jumped back above $100 immediately after the statement. The market understood what the analysts understood. This closure is not temporary. This closure is the primary negotiating leverage Iran has, and Iran's new leader just told the world he intends to keep using it. Point three, he warned neighboring countries, he told the Gulf Arab states directly to shut down U.S. military bases on their territory. He said the protection Washington promises them is, quote, nothing more than a lie. And he said that while Iran is not attacking those countries themselves, the bases hosted on their soil will continue to be struck. Overnight, before this statement was even released, Iran demonstrated it was not making empty threats. A container ship was hit with a projectile off the coast of Dubai. A major fire broke out on Muharraq Island in Bahrain near the international airport. A drone struck a residential building in Kuwait, wounding 2 people. Dubai's air defenses were activated twice to protect the city. Saudi Arabia shot down a drone targeting the diplomatic quarter in Riyadh. That is 5 Gulf Arab countries hit in a single night. Point 4, he revealed something that analysts were not expecting. He said, and I want you to read this carefully, studies have been conducted regarding the opening of other fronts in which the enemy has little experience and is highly vulnerable. Activating them will take place if the state of war continues and if it serves our interests. He did not say which fronts. He did not give details, but Iran has previously been linked to operations targeting U.S., Israeli, and Jewish institutions across multiple continents. The deliberate vagueness of this statement is itself the message. It is telling Washington, you do not know where the next escalation comes from. Drop a comment right now. Tell me this. Do you think Iran's 3 demands are realistic? Can this war end through negotiation, or has it already gone too far? I read every comment. I want to know what you think before I show you the 3 conditions, because after you see them, your answer might change. Iran's 3 ceasefire conditions and why each one is impossible. Iran's president, Masoud Pezeshkian, went public on Wednesday with the 3 conditions Tehran is demanding before it will agree to any ceasefire. He made the announcement after phone calls with both Vladimir Putin and officials from regional governments. These conditions are now on the record. They are not rumors, not back-channel suggestions, not anonymous leaks. These are official, public demands from the government of Iran. Here they are. Condition 1, recognition of rights. Iran demands what its officials describe as recognition of Iran's legitimate rights. In practical terms, it means the United States and international community must formally acknowledge Iran's right to pursue the full nuclear fuel cycle, including uranium enrichment. Iran is demanding that the world accept that its nuclear program will continue under Iranian control, not under IAEA verification, not under the restrictions of the JCPOA, and not under any new deal that Washington shapes. Let me be direct about why this is impossible for the United States to accept. The entire stated justification for launching Operation Epic Fury on February 28th was to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. Trump said it explicitly. Secretary Hegseth said it at multiple Pentagon briefings. The operational objective that both the U.S. and Israel have publicly stated. The reason American service members are dying in this war is the permanent elimination of Iran's nuclear capability. Accepting Condition 1 would mean publicly declaring that those 9 Americans who died and the 140 who were wounded gave their lives and their health for nothing. That is politically, strategically, and domestically impossible for any U.S. administration to accept. Condition 2, reparations. Iran is demanding financial compensation for the damage caused by U.S. and Israeli strikes since February 28th. This includes destruction of military infrastructure, civilian buildings, hospitals, schools, and the economic cost of the war to the Iranian economy. There is no figure publicly attached to this demand. But consider the scale of destruction described by CENTCOM's own briefings. Over 5,500 targets struck. Nuclear facilities at Natanz and Fordo destroyed. Revolutionary Guard command centers eliminated. Missile stockpiles degraded by over 86%, according to Pentagon data. The infrastructure of an entire country's military has been systematically dismantled over 13 days. No United States administration, Democrat or Republican, has ever paid war reparations to a country it has been in armed conflict with. The concept is not just politically toxic, it is constitutionally and legally unprecedented in modern American history. It would require congressional approval. It would require the United States to formally acknowledge legal responsibility for all civilian casualties, including those children killed in Minab. The political impossibility of this demand is complete. Condition 3, binding international guarantees. Iran wants formal binding international guarantees, backed by international law and verified by the United Nations, that neither the United States nor Israel will ever attack Iran again. Getting a U.S. president to sign a binding, legally enforceable promise to never use military force against Iran would require Senate ratification, since it would function as a treaty. A Senate that just watched American service members die in combat against Iran would need to ratify a permanent non-aggression guarantee. That scenario does not exist in any political reality currently visible. And the Israeli government, whose stated objective alongside destroying Iran's nuclear program has been the permanent degradation of Iran's military threat to Israel's survival, would need to sign a binding promise never to act against the country that spent decades building weapons and funding proxy forces explicitly designated for Israel's destruction. That is not a diplomatic solution. That is a surrender document. Now, here is the critical question that every analyst and government is wrestling with right now. Are these demands real? Or are they a starting position in a negotiation? An opening offer designed to be walked back towards something that could actually be agreed to. The other side has a point. Here's where they're right. I want to be fair here, because there is another interpretation of these demands, and it deserves honest examination. The argument for optimism, such as it is, first, U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff sent 2 formal proposals to Tehran on Tuesday, March 10th. Iran did not respond publicly, but the fact that communication channels exist, that proposals are being sent and received at all, tells you that the door to negotiation has not been completely slammed shut. When governments are truly committed to no negotiation, they do not receive proposals, they refuse the channel entirely. Second, Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi told PBS News on Wednesday that his country was prepared to talk. He added that guarantees would be required, but he did not say the three conditions were non-negotiable in every detail. Diplomatic language leaves room. The question is whether anyone can find it. Third, Russia matters here. Pezeshkian spoke with Putin before making the public announcement of the three conditions. According to the Kremlin readout, Putin expressed support for de-escalation. Russia has more leverage over Iran than it is currently exercising. If Moscow decides a ceasefire is in its strategic interest, it has tools to push Tehran toward flexibility. And here is the strongest counterargument of all. Iran's IRGC-controlled government is losing militarily. Their missile activity has dropped 86% from where it started. Their ballistic missile stockpiles have been severely degraded. Their navy has been largely destroyed. Their nuclear facilities are rubble. A government that has lost this much military capability has a strong incentive to find an exit that preserves face, even if the public demands sound impossible. But here is the problem with the optimistic interpretation. Iran's new supreme leader's statement today was not a diplomatic message with coded signals of flexibility. It was a statement of defiance. Every point in it was designed for a domestic Iranian audience that has watched its capital bombed, its leadership killed, its children buried. The political pressure on Mojtaba Khamenei, a man who owes his position entirely to the IRGC, is to demonstrate strength, not accommodation. Reuters cited 5 senior Iranian sources who described the new leadership as moving toward, quote, a more radical direction. One reformist former official said the IRGC now has full control. Alex Vatanka, senior fellow at the Middle East Institute, said directly, Mojtaba owes his position to the Revolutionary Guards, and as such, he is not going to be as supreme as his father was. His father could rein in the IRGC. His father had 37 years of built authority to say no to their worst escalation proposals. Mojtaba Khamenei does not have that authority. He cannot exercise it even if he wanted to. The IRGC does not negotiate through him. They govern through him. That is the gap between the optimistic interpretation and the ground reality. And right now, the gap is enormous. This is not just a geopolitical story. It's already in your wallet. Let me show you why this matters beyond headlines and maps and geopolitical analysis. Because this war, and specifically the question of whether Iran's 3 conditions make it impossible to end, is already costing ordinary people money. Today, right now. Oil. When this war began on February 28th, Brent crude was trading at approximately $80 a barrel. By March 12th, today, it is back above $100 following Mojtaba Khamenei's statement, having touched $119.50 at its peak. That is a 38% increase in 13 days. Reuters reported this morning that oil supertanker rates had hit an all-time high of $423,736 per day, a 94% increase in a single week. Every time an Iranian official signals that the Hormuz closure is permanent policy rather than temporary tactic, oil markets reprice upward. The new supreme leader just made that signal as clearly as possible. His first public words included the phrase tool to pressure the enemy in reference to the strait. He did not say temporary measure. He did not say we will reopen it when conditions are met. He said it must continue to be used. Present tense. Ongoing policy. Wood Mackenzie's analysts project oil reaching $150 per barrel if the closure continues for more than a few weeks. At $150, U.S. retail gas prices reach $5.50 to $6.00. nationally. That is money leaving every American family's budget every week, compounding. Your groceries. This is the part most coverage is skipping. Qatar is one of the world's largest producers of nitrogen-based fertilizers, the chemicals that grow the corn, wheat, rice, and soybeans that feed both people and livestock globally. Qatar Energy has already curtailed production following strikes on its facilities. According to the Fertilizer Institute, approximately 30% of global ammonia production is now at risk from this conflict. Spring planting season in the U.S. Midwest begins in 4 to 6 weeks. American farmers are making fertilizer purchasing decisions right now. If fertilizer prices stay elevated or supplies remain disrupted, the harvest this fall will be smaller. The food price increase you feel at the grocery store by late summer and into 2027 will not be temporary. It will reflect a reduced harvest. That is a direct line from Mojtaba Khamenei's statement today to the price of bread at your store 5 months from now. Your retirement account. Ed Yardeni, one of Wall Street's most respected veteran analysts, has placed a 35% probability on a stock market meltdown tied to this conflict. JP Morgan Chase, the largest bank in the United States, has warned of a 10% market decline. The S&P 500 was down 7.3% since February 28th, before today's statement. The new Supreme Leader's declaration that the strait closure is permanent policy, not a temporary measure, will push that number further. If your 401k or pension fund has consumer, manufacturing, or airline exposure, you have already felt this. Today's statement means there is more to come. The UNHCR, the United Nations Refugee Agency, reported today that 3.2 million people have been displaced inside Iran alone since this war began. 800,000 more in Lebanon. The humanitarian numbers are staggering, but they also translate into geopolitical reality. No Iranian leader, with 3.2 million of his own citizens displaced by U.S. and Israeli bombs, is going to accept a ceasefire that looks like defeat. That pressure makes the three conditions less flexible, not more. Hit the like button right now if this breakdown is useful to you. I spend hours going through these statements, these reports, these diplomatic filings, so you get the analysis instead of just the headline. The like button tells the algorithm this kind of detailed coverage matters. It takes 2 seconds. It helps enormously. And subscribe. Turn on notifications. I will be here the moment anything breaks on the ceasefire negotiations. The next statement from Mojtaba Khamenei, or the oil market response to whatever happens next. The 3 documents that show why this was always going to happen. This did not come out of nowhere. 6 months before this war began, classified intelligence assessments, portions of which were later provided to congressional oversight members, warned that Iran had prepositioned mines and fast attack boat squadrons in the southern Gulf in anticipation of exactly this kind of U.S. military action. 12 months before this war began, the IAEA's confidential assessment noted that Iran had accumulated sufficient enriched uranium for multiple weapons if further processed. Their exact language, the agency cannot confirm that further enrichment has not occurred at undeclared facilities. 2 years before this war began, a reformist member of Iran's Assembly of Experts told the BBC that Ali Khamenei had specifically spoken against his son, Mojtaba, being a candidate for succession. And yet, Fordow was bombed, Natanz was bombed, Ali Khamenei was killed, Mojtaba was elevated. The IRGC took full control, and now, on day 13, the man whose family was wiped out in the opening strikes of this war is telling the world that the strait stays closed, new fronts are being studied, and Peace requires the United States to pay reparations and acknowledge Iran's nuclear rights. Every indicator was there. The IAEA reports, the intelligence warnings, the succession debates, the mime prepositioning, the insurance premium spikes. The pattern was visible in advance to people who were reading the right documents. The question is not whether warning signs existed. They did. The question that history will ask, and that analysts are already asking, is whether the people who made the decision to launch Operation Epic Fury on February 28th had a credible answer to the question, what happens if this does not end quickly? Because right now, on day 13, the answer to that question is the one that Iran's new supreme leader gave this morning. And it was not a ceasefire offer. What are the experts saying? Alex Vatanka, senior fellow, Middle East Institute, Washington, D.C., the most cited analyst on Iran's new leadership this week, said directly, Mojtaba owes his position to the Revolutionary Guards, and as such, he is not going to be as supreme as his father was. Plain English. The man who issued today's statement does not actually control all the decisions behind it. The IRGC does. Negotiating a ceasefire requires a counterpart who can deliver on the agreement. If Mojtaba cannot overrule the IRGC, then any deal he signs is only as durable as IRGC approval. Jasmine El-Gamal, former Middle East advisor, U.S. Department of Defense. The two sides continue to be quite far apart. That's why I say we're going to continue to see more escalation from a military perspective over the next few days. She said this specifically in the context of Mojtaba's psychology, a man who lost his father, his mother, his wife, and his son in a single airstrike, and who is now being asked by the United States to accept terms that would make all of that loss appear to have been in vain. Hale Croft, global head of commodity strategy, RBC Capital Markets. The mine disclosure is the piece of this story that changes the timeline completely. Without mine clearing operations, the question is not whether the U.S. can escort tankers. The question is whether any tanker captain on Earth is willing to sail into a minefield regardless of U.S. Navy presence. And on the three conditions themselves, Jonathan Schanzer, Foundation for Defense of Democracy, speaking to multiple outlets this week, these are not opening positions. These are face-saving formulations designed for a domestic Iranian audience. The real negotiation, if it happens, will happen in back channels, not in press conferences. But right now, those back channels are not producing results. When professionals across the ideological spectrum, defense officials, oil analysts, Iran specialists, all converge on the same assessment, that convergence is the most reliable signal available. And the convergence right now is this. The gap between what Iran is demanding and what the U.S. can accept is not a negotiating gap. It is a strategic chasm. The timeline, what to watch in the next 72 hours. Here's exactly what I am watching. These are the dates and events that will tell us whether this war moves toward a managed de-escalation or a longer, more destructive phase. Tonight, March 12th. The U.S. Central Command is expected to provide its next operational briefing. The key question to listen for: any mention of mine clearing operations. Not offensive strikes, mine clearing. That is the operational step that would make Hormuz reopening realistic. If CENTCOM says nothing about mine clearing tonight, that silence has meaning. Friday, March 13, the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization releases its full seismic analysis of the anomalous underground event recorded 8 months ago at a site 60 kilometers southeast of Isfahan. That report will either confirm or cast significant doubt on whether Iran conducted an underground nuclear test. If it confirms the test, the entire strategic landscape of this war changes permanently. Friday, March 13th, Lloyd's of London War Risk Committee holds its weekly review. Their decision on Gulf War risk insurance premiums is the actual gatekeeper for whether commercial tankers start moving again. If Lloyd's lowers premiums, ships begin moving regardless of political statements. If Lloyd's holds or raises, ships stay out. Watch Lloyd's more than you watch the Pentagon. Saturday, March 14th, the first tankers that have been anchored outside the Persian Gulf since March 2nd reach the point where they must make a decision. They cannot wait indefinitely. Fuel, crew contracts, and cargo obligations have limits. Watch whether any tanker captain decides the risk is manageable. A single successful transit would break the psychological wall that has kept all commercial shipping out for 12 days, the next 24 to 48 hours. Mojtaba Khamenei must appear, not in a written statement, on camera, speaking, demonstrating that he is alive, functional, and in control. Until that happens, every intelligence agency in the world and every market will be pricing in uncertainty about whether Iran even has a functioning supreme leader. The longer he remains invisible, the more power defaults to IRGC commanders who are not elected, not publicly accountable, and have the least incentive to negotiate. The most important thing to watch is not the military action. It is whether the back channel between U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff and Iranian representatives produces a response. Iran did not respond to Witkoff's two proposals on Tuesday. If there is still no response by the weekend, the window for a quick diplomatic resolution begins to close. Here is where we stand right now. Today, March 12th, 2026, day 13 of this war. Mojtaba Khamenei, Iran's new supreme leader, wounded, in hiding, never seen on camera, issued his first statement since being appointed 4 days ago. He declared, "The Strait of Hormuz must remain closed as a weapon against the United States." He said all U.S. bases in the region will be attacked. He warned of new war fronts being studied. He vowed revenge for every Iranian killed. Iran's president simultaneously put 3 conditions on the table for any ceasefire: recognition of nuclear rights, payment of reparations, and binding international guarantees against future attack. Every professional analyst who has studied this region says those conditions are not opening negotiating positions. They are political survival statements for a government under military assault. Speaking to an audience of 3.2 million displaced people and a nation watching its cities bombed. Trump responded today by saying Iran's nuclear issue is more important than rising oil prices. He has not addressed the 3 conditions directly. Witkoff's proposals sit unanswered in Tehran. Oil is back above $100 a barrel. Tankers are not moving. Mines are in the water. 9 Americans are dead. 140 are wounded. And the man who just became the most powerful figure in the most volatile region in the world just told the world he is not done. This is where we are. Not a war moving toward its conclusion, a war moving toward a longer, more complex, and more expensive phase for soldiers, for civilians, for energy markets, and for every ordinary person whose grocery bill and gas price and retirement account are connected, invisibly but directly, to a 21-mile strait in the Persian Gulf that one man just declared must stay closed. Subscribe now, turn on notifications. When Mojtaba Khamenei appears on camera for the first time, I will break down every frame of it. When the ceasefire negotiations produce a response or collapse, I will have it covered the same way I covered this. Evidence first, analysis second. What it means for you, always. And before you go, one question in the comments. Just one. Do you think these three demands are Iran's real conditions, or are they a starting point? And if they're real, how does this war end? Leave your answer below. I am reading every single response.